Satan is probably the single worst designed character in all of Xenogears, and I don't throw that term around lightly. Frankly, I never use that description of anything. I think most people who do are just really whiny and want to complain about something being really good. So when I throw that term around, I genuinely mean it. I think he is a terribly designed party member. He just happens to be the best party member in the game. Good comparison for why Satan is really poorly designed is looking at Billy, who has a lot in common with him. They have the same spell list more or less, and Billy is also top tier. The difference with Billy, however, is a lot of nuances. Billy already has a defined weakness, but you can compound that weakness even further by customizing him to certain roles. Billy can do a lot, but Billy is also limited to how you set him up, and every way you set him up will come with detriments. He can't be the strongest support in the game, a good damage dealer, and capable of tanking damage all at once. You have to make sacrifices, and it's usually multiple sacrifices at once. And then you look at Satan, and I don't even think he has anything that constitutes as an actual downside. Like, yeah, he doesn't have something like Graviton Cannon, but it's not really a downside that he doesn't have the strongest spell in the game. He legitimately has a stat spread I would argue is genuinely perfect. He has the highest base HP in the game, and will generally be one of the toughest party members you have throughout the entirety of the game. A solid attack stat that, while a bit weaker than, say, Faye, is generally the same and is not even worth quantifying as a weaker attack stat. And, oh yeah, just happens to have a monstrous 40 EP to start with in a game where the cap is 99. But none of that's why everyone knows Citan's the best character on foot, it's his speed. He's generally the fastest character in the game. Emeralda is as fast in the vanilla game, but that's the last party member in the game, and Satan's technically the second. For most of the game, he's going to be outrunning everyone, by a lot. Outside of Bart and Faye, for most of the game, he's going to get 2 turns before some people get 1. So there's the solution, right? Just nerf his speed. Surely that just balances the character out perfectly and there's no need to go any further, right? Well, if you couldn't tell by the length of the video, there's a lot more to talk about than just nerf his speed stat and suddenly he's a good character. There's several reasons we don't want to just nerf his speed stat and then just call it there. A lot of games have a visionless approach to game design where you just sort of nerf something because it was the best and swear that makes the game more balanced. We don't have a problem with Satan being good, we just have a problem with how he's good. Let's say we do nerf Satan's speed. Let's say to 10. That was the awkward number that no other party member really had in Xenogears and they skipped over from Billy to Bart. Well, all you have now is a version of Billy that's slightly faster, doesn't get a res spell, has generally worse damage, and has 0 customization to him whatsoever. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a well-designed character now, does it? To the shock of nobody, if you just nerf the best option in the game, people are just going to pick the second best option. You can't design a game around kneecapping everyone who comes in first place, because eventually you're just going to get to the point where you're kneecapping the guy who originally came in last place. But beyond all of that, one of the main reasons we're not taking away his speed is because Satan is fun when he's fast. The changes we make do come with a lot of complaints from people. Even stuff as simple as we made this character's name more accurate to what it originally was in Japanese. The reason these videos exist is primarily so you can hear our perspective from this, so you know why we did the things we did. So let me be perfectly clear. We get that Satan is very popular, and we also get that people will admit, in spite of that, he is not a very well-balanced character. We don't want to take away what people like from the character, we just want them to be a more nuanced character that's, not completely invalidating certain characters. The solution then doesn't come from Satan's stats, it comes from his spells, and one you probably wouldn't think would be that overpowered if you just looked at it in a vacuum. Renki might be the single strongest spell in the game, just in terms of what it does for the character it's on. It really doesn't seem like that much to turn 3 turns of actions into 2 turns of actions, but it really does a lot to bring out all of Satan's worst qualities. Think about how you use Satan against every boss fight in this game. Every boss will probably start with you using Renki and sitting on it until you need to use it. What this translates to is Satan casts a spell once and then just turns into a generic fighter who outputs more damage than all the cast because he outruns all the cast. And then when one party member gets to half health, he full heals every party member, sets up that Renki spell again, and then just goes back to hitting things. It's not the fact that he's a healer with a combat focus that's the issue, in fact that's a positive. It's the fact that Satan just sort of forgets to be a healer half the time. Like, healing is a bonus that comes with Satan. You picked a physical fighter who happens to be able to full heal the party. For contrast, because he's the literal direct comparison, Billy never feels like a mage or a warrior who just happens to have a haste spell and a full heal. He feels like a support. He feels like a character who's primarily there for the utilities he brings, who just happens to be able to defend himself pretty decently. Satan's issue isn't that he's really, really strong, it's that he's really, really one-note, and Renki is like the perfect example as to why. You don't really need to do any of your support functions until it becomes an emergency, or at the start of a fight, and there's no exception to this throughout the entirety of the game. The reason Billy can get away with being almost as good as him isn't just because he's second place. It's because Billy's a lot more nuanced. There's a lot of customization, equipment setups. There's builds for Billy. He has limitations, he has strengths that have downsides. With Renki, Satan doesn't have a downside. He has incredible stats, incredible speed, and the one weakness he could have, being having to focus on his support utilities due to their single target nature, he can literally get rid of. So we removed Renki from his spell list. This makes it so Doc plays, funny enough, less like a doctor, and more like a first responder. He's the best at treating immediate injuries to the party, but other healers are better at full sustain than he is now. Obviously, this isn't the only thing we're doing to Satan. We didn't want to just take away one of his best abilities and then just leave him at that. For starters, his spell list has been relaxed a bit, that way you can learn some of the more fun tools earlier in the game. In place of Renki, though, is the big change, as he now has a resurrection spell. This was chosen for a number of reasons, but one of the bigger ones is the fact that the player doesn't get many ways to resurrect party members outside of Zeta Souls. Billy's res and Choo Choo's by extension are very late game, so an early game option on a frequently mandatory party member is a very welcome change. And speaking of Billy, another one of the reasons was to create contrast with Billy, by, ironically enough, taking a spell that Billy had and giving it to Citan. Billy gets a revive spell too, but it's at the end of his spell list. Satan meanwhile gets a haste spell at the end of his spell list, but Billy starts with a haste spell. This creates a fun contrast between the two when you're deciding which one to pick, and if you're running both of them, it lets them both work together with some level of uniqueness. Another part of the revive spell for Satan that makes it more interesting is the fact that it heals very, very little health when you revive someone. By around Disc 2, if you revive someone with this spell, they'll still be in the red. Admittedly, this wasn't intentional, but we view it more as a weakness rather than a flaw. It makes it so the other resurrection options don't get invalidated by Satan being faster than them, and it adds a level of choice. His spell is cheaper than Zeta Souls in the long term, but Zeta Souls guarantee that person's getting back on their feet. Sometimes with Satan you can revive them and they'll just get knocked down immediately if you're not careful. That's already a lot for effectively one spell change on one character. But you have to remember that Satan wasn't terribly designed because he was the best character on foot. It was because he was also the worst character in Gears. Heimdall is the definition of useless in vanilla Xenogears. It has all of Veltal stats. This is especially bad considering Heimdall is redundant to the gear you're forced to use for 99% of the game. Its only niche until Fenrir is that it can give buffs to other gears, and it is the only gear in the game to be able to do this. This feature is generally useless, however, because one Jesse Cannon shot can kill most bosses at the end of Disc 1. Even the game knows this gear is bad. It has 2 mandatory fights in Bart's Lair where it's first introduced, and roughly 7 bosses it's prohibited from even though you realistically could have used it for that boss. That is how much the game hates this gear. With increased enemy stats and an actual ether defense stat on many bosses, his buffs are actually much more noticeably helpful, but it was still never enough to make you actually want to use Heimdall. Like with Satan on foot, the focus was put on making his support options much better, instead of just messing with his combat stats and hoping that makes him more fun to use. And that solution was relatively simple. Heimdall is now the second gear in the game that can heal other gears. This seems like it just invalidates Choo Choo, but as we'll get into when we get to her video, Choo Choo's healing does multi-healing now instead of just single target. The other part that keeps Choo Choo relevant is the healing amount. Choo Choo heals for 2,000, Satan heals for 500. He has to heal one person 4 times to equate what Choo Choo does once with healing. And you have to remember that that number is actually tripled because it's healing 3 party members at once. This helps Heimdall a lot by just giving it a different role to fulfill than Veltal. It's not just a jack of all trades, It's a general support unit. But more importantly than that, it just gives Heimdall something to do. It's not just something that punches you in the face for mediocre damage. It has utilities now, support functionality. And more than anything, that was the main goal with Satan. It wasn't to make him worse, and it wasn't just to make his gear better. It was about fleshing him out. His big issue isn't, again, that he was a really good character, or that his gear was garbage. It's that he was incredibly one-note. More than making him worse on foot and better in gears, the changes mainly exist to flesh out Satan as a character. Because we're totally fine if he's still the best character in the game. We just want a level of interactivity with the character now.